Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm Emma Hegel, the Senior Events Manager at the Canadian Marketing Association, and welcome to this morning's Marketing Connected Live. Firstly, I hope everyone is doing well and continuing to stay safe. Before we get started, I quickly wanted to mention that should you have any questions for the speakers during today's session, please use the Q&A feature to submit these. Questions will be addressed at the end of the session. All right, this morning, CMA's President and CEO, John Wiltshire, will be chatting with Steve Mast, President and Chief Innovation Officer at Delvinia, as well as he's CMA's Board Chair, about CMA's vision for the future of marketing. Please join me in a virtual applause to welcome them.
Thanks, Emma, and welcome to everyone out there today. It's great to have you along with us, and I'm particularly thrilled to have Steve Mast with us. Good morning, Steve. How are you doing today?
Very good, John. And yourself? How's Winnipeg?
Winnipeg is just fine. It feels like wherever you are in the world today, you're connected, and I think that's kind of exciting. So congratulations, first of all, for your chairmanship or chairship of the CMA. We'll talk a little bit about that later. I also noticed a bit of a cartoon in the background there. I see John and a picture of a guy. I hope that's not supposed to be me. I doubt it, but tell me the story behind that.
Well, that's my daughter's artwork. So she's now 14. I think she drew that when she was around 10, so about 4 years ago. And who knew? We had a little artist in the family. So she doodles all the time and creates these cartoons. The one in the corner there, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it says Ghostly. And I swear that's me. She says, no, it's not. But I often use that as my social media profile, as a little ghostly thing. So yeah, so that's my daughter's artwork there.
Yeah. So one of the things about this whole COVID-19 thing is, in some ways, we've gotten a glimpse more into people's personal lives. We've been almost forced, in some ways, to interact at a different level, more personal level. In some ways, I've been blogging to my staff on a daily basis. This morning's blog was about values, and I kind of asked them if they wanted to share of a list of 50 what their 3 most important values are. I started thinking a little bit about this call and about you, Steve, and one of the things I've always valued about you is you and I do share some of the same top values. I believe so anyways, and I was thinking about the value of optimism, authenticity, and growth, and I think that kind of allows us to have great conversations together, even though our opinions may differ on lots of topics. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, it's interesting to talk about just on your point there around getting to know people in a different way. And you think of the number of living rooms and kitchens that you've been invited into via Zoom and other sort of video conferences. You get a whole other side of people, and just understanding or meeting their kids. I have lots of staff members which I've never met their kids or their dogs or their cats for that matter. And now being invited in people's homes with all these different calls, you get a real different sort of side of them. There's this whole thing I keep talking about around virtualizing culture, where I think is something which it can be very challenging in these times where you can't have that direct human interaction. But in some ways, I think the virtualization has been actually a positive thing, because again, you've got to know people in ways that and people have become very open and vulnerable in these times as well. So, yeah. And then just back to your point, yes, we do share a lot of the same values. We've had some great discussions over dinner, many, many times. I always sort of walk away with those things where, wow, that was a very thoughtful discussion, and I feel better after it. But I will say we absolutely come at problems differently, which I think makes us stronger. I think about the board that we have right now too. There's a lot of different opinions around the table, a lot of respect. But I believe that you want different opinions around the table. That's how you solve problems.
That's great. This is about today's session is about the CMA, because you're coming in, and I think people are going to be interested in your vision and where you think we need to be in the future. I was thinking about your past as well, and that you've been around the CMA for a number of years. How has that been for you as you've journeyed into the career that you have?
Yeah, it's amazing how fast time flies. It really is. You know, it was 2003 when we first joined. It was the customer experience. Actually, it was called the Customer Experience and Analytics Council. That's what it used to be called. And I think secretly I wanted to join the Digital Marketing Council, but there wasn't any room on it. So, but I had an inkling customer experience was going to be pretty big. And obviously it's become sort of a backbone of most marketing initiatives. So that was my first sort of take into the CMA. And I think from day one, I was just taken back by the professionalism, and just the people around the table as well, and the interaction, and many of those people have become lifelong friends, you know, colleagues and friends. So I think that's been a great experience. But I've seen the CMA just evolve over that time continuously. And I think that's something where it's a bit of and I think sometimes people think the CMA isn't changing. In fact, it's changing rapidly all the time. And, you know, you think about one of the things I worked on was a number of the conferences, and we used to have one main big conference years ago, and we had some other smaller ones, but the big main conference, we put a lot of effort into it, just like we do with the award show. And we realized that, you know, the community was changing, and just in terms of how people were looking at events was changing. And we changed along with that. And I think for the better now. We have very, very strong breakfast series now. We have lots of different events, sort of, you know, satisfying all the various different disciplines within marketing. And that's the other thing too, like, as I reflect back, you know, the CMA used to be the Direct Marketing Association, if you really want to go back. And, you know, which was data was at the heart of it, which is kind of funny because you've sort of come full circle on that. But, you know, now we you know, we're catering to all disciplines. We continue to sort of evolve. We don't have a digital marketing council. We have a MarTech council now. So this whole notion of kind of the evolution of how things have evolved, I think for me have been just fascinating with the journey. And then the relationships that I've gained over the time have been fantastic. And then I think the last thing was, so I've been a member of the board for 6 years now. The first 2 years were pretty uneventful, quite honestly. It was a large board. You know, it wasn't necessarily, there wasn't a whole lot to do or manage. And then that all changed dramatically when we realized we needed new leadership in the CEO position. And, you know, I you know, quickly raised my hand and said, listen, what do you need my help with? What do you need to do? And, you know, I really watched Stephen Brown, Brian Pearson, and Chris Stamper, who all just, you know, masterfully led and chaired. And I learned a tremendous amount from them, watching and participating with them over that time as it took the CMA through a massive transformation that a lot of people probably don't know about. And that's what's really created the very strong foundation that we're sitting in today.
That's great, Steve. I got some bad news for you. The chair of the CMA does not, there's no income associated with it. So it's a volunteer position. Yeah, I say that obviously facetiously, but, you know, what would inspire someone to want to give up what would inspire Steve to want to give up a chunk of your time? And it's a chunk, you know, it's a real specific chunk to provide leadership with the CMA in these times. What motivates? Yeah,
I don't think people, yeah, absolutely. I don't think people realize it is, you know, it is another job. It really is. And it's an important job. The volunteering thing, I think this is something where it's interesting. I think this is back to you and I and our values, and where we have sort of similar traits. And, you know, I was raised very much so that you give as much of your time as you do of your wallet. That was just a fundamental core belief. And, you know, the CMA has been absolutely great to me in my career. And I just, you know, I want to give back. I want to give back to the community. You know, it's funny. I think over the years, I'm not sure I really considered myself a true marketer. I'll just be totally honest about that. But at the heart, that's exactly who I am in terms of, you know, when I look past my career and all the different things I've been involved in and have done. And, you know, the CMA has just been a backbone of that for many, many years. Many of the relationships, like I mentioned before, that I grew, professional and non-professional, have come out of the CMA. So so I think, you know, just from an overall sort of community perspective, I think it's important to give back in some way. I also believe too that, and we've talked about this, that it's a really interesting time for Canada on the global stage. And when you think about the number of, you know, CMOs, the number of global creative directors that are now taking very big profile positions on major brands on the global stage that are Canadian. Really? Just a fun little story. Just recently, a good friend of mine, his wife just took a leadership position as the national lead brand manager for a major quick service restaurant in the US, which will have global effects as well. And they wanted her because of her Canadianness. Like that, it was, you know, and I'm like, Canadianness, what does that mean? Is that like you're really nice and you say sorry all the time? And but it's this thoughtfulness, this idea that we have such a sort of a diverse group of you know, people from all over the world that live in such an amazing harmony in Canada. And then the other part of it is just, you know, we don't shout, we listen as Canadians. We're very good listeners. And, you know, I think the world is getting tired of marketing where you're just shouting at people. You need to listen, observe, and then react to people with strong value systems. So, you know, to me, it's Canada's time, right? And I think anything I can do to help sort of promote that is a big reason why I want to be part of it.
That's great, and we're all the staff and the board, I think, as well, are all looking forward to your leadership. So thank you for stepping up and stepping out and giving back. You know, I think that's incredibly important. So your blog, which hopefully people have read, expresses some things that we're doing well, and I thank you for that. I think we're doing our job, and that's great. But what are some areas, because that's not as interesting as this next question, like what are some areas where you think we ought to do better as a CMA? At the board level, at the staff level, at the community level, like what are some of the areas that you think we can improve in?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of three areas, and I think it is well architected within sort of the vision as we move sort of forward. But the stronger voice component, I think, is a really important piece. After all, we represent a lot of different members from a lot of different brands and marketing agencies, for that matter. So, and I think we have to be careful on what that voice is and what battles we want to pick and what we want to take on. You know, like, I mean, at the foundation, we've built an amazing professional organization where, you know, I think we might talk about this a little bit later, but the ability to go from cradle to grave in your development as a marketer, which is so important in these days and ages, like just the evolution of where things are going and so quickly. So, but I do think we need that strong voice to represent, and, you know, that's something I think we need to continuously work on. The second thing would be broader reach. And what I mean by that is there might be an international or a global perspective on that as well, because I think there is something really special about what's going on with Canada, and if we could reach out beyond that. So there's, you know, sort of different markets, if you will. And I know you spent a lot of time in different areas speaking with different CEOs, different associations. But what I mean by broader reach is if you look at the marketing profession as a whole, you know, it really needs to tap into many different areas within an organization to really try to, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit later when we talk about the modern marketer, but the idea of it being a great unifier. And I think that's really important in that broader reach, understanding, you know, what's HR's issues? What are their problems? You know, so that's another area in terms of this idea of broader reach. And then the final one is it's talent. And a lot of that comes back to the professional development piece, which I think we have a really strong foundation there. But we need to continue to sort of evolve that. And when I say evolve beyond just even our corporate relationships, you know, I mean, you know, I think there's maybe there's a bit of a feeling where we don't have enough creative agencies or enough of that side of things. Stephen Brown said, years ago, we're part art, part science. That's kind of what the CMA is. And, I think marketing is gone deep into the science. And I think the CMA has spent a lot of time in that area with data and MarTech and things like that. We may need to balance out a little of the art part of it. So I think that talent, the diversity in the talent, I think is really important, and continue nurturing that. So those are the three things that I would see.
That's great. Talent and diversity, stronger voice, wider reach. I think I agree with that. And, particularly the whole area of talent. And we realize that as I've talked to a number of people in the community of marketing, they, one or two on their list will always be, how do we get the best talent into this community? And, how do we actually find a way to attract the best talent to make that marketing profession something that they all want to drive towards, so the best people go into it. We are starting up a council on talent, and we want to, within that council, we want to tackle lots of different areas of diversity. And so that, look forward to that. If people want to participate in that, I think that's a great place to go. We're looking to fill those roles. I think next Monday we'll deal with some of that. But I'm supposed to be interviewing you, so I'll go back to.
Well, no, I think there's an interesting point. I think you bring up an interesting point, John, though, around the one thing that I think we always have to balance as an association is proactive and reactive. And I think sometimes there might be a bit of a perception we're being reactive. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's been a lot of proactivity gone on. But, again, we can only take on so many things and do so many things really, really well, right? So we have to be careful about what are we going to do really, really well, and what are the things that we need to be proactive about and looking at for the future. So I think the talent thing is a great example of that. So it's something that I know you've been in the works with it for a while. The professional development thing has been something, even the Charter Marketer program for years now has been in the works and continues to nurture. That was a proactive for the future, building the foundation for the future, right? So, but then there's many reactive things that we live in evolving times and evolving technology. So we need to change digital to MarTech. That's a bit of a reactive thing versus something we could see out of the future. So it is a bit of a balancing act between these two things. So from a strategic perspective, you're always kind of going back and re-looking at that plan and going, okay, did we need to change something a little bit along the way?
No, that's great. I do want to talk a little bit about, I know you camped out in your career and you've talked about a lot of different places about, the notion of this modern marketer. I love the concept of it because it's evergreen, it never ends. Like what was modern 3 years ago isn't modern today. When you talk about the modern marketer, like what do you really mean by that?
So, back in January, I actually attended an event that the CMA Next program and RBC, I think you guys were the sponsor, I believe. It was the Queen's Marketing Association event. And I was the guest speaker on the last day. And, Sheldon kind of reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, absolutely. Didn't really know what to expect when I walked into it. But I got to tell you, I was, first of all, blown away by the talent pool that I met that evening. I really do feel the marketing profession is going to be in great hands in a few years as these young people start to get into the workforce. It's just incredible, just really smart, innovative, diverse ways of thinking about and solving problems. But the one thing that I found really amazing was there was a contest that Sheldon was running for the CMA Next program, and it was basically they had a number of different teams compete against each other and come up with a promotional program for CMA Next. And the young gentleman that won it, Evan, he presented, and it was a fantastic presentation. But that's not what I found interesting about it. I found interesting about his sort of education background. So he majored in marketing and minored in human resource studies. And I've been following a lot of what's been going on in sort of the people and culture and human resource side of things. And I came up to him afterwards and I said, you got to tell me about why you minored in that. And his response was brilliant, way beyond his years, quite honestly. He looked at it as being that the marketing profession is very much so that outward looking, and very much so around it's the customer experience, it's the communication outward to those customers. And then HR is very much so about the employee experience. It shouldn't be looked at upon as an administrative function. It's looked upon as you're guiding the employees, you're creating an employee experience. So it's that two halves of the coin. And for a young man to have that perspective, maybe he's got a great prof that told him, I don't know, or maybe he's just been reading a lot. And there's lots of examples in the marketplace of, CMOs that have, employee or culture sort of rolling into them because they want to sort of have that component. But it kind of comes back to this notion, the modern marketer to me is the great unifier. And when you think about it, what other group within an organization or what other profession within an organization can touch so many aspects of an organization? And I'm not talking about just them, like parts of the organization helping them, but the other way around. Right. So marketing can support HR in so many ways around employee experience, or just finding great talent and supporting them and promoting that. The Next program is a great example of that. Even finance needs a little marketing, right? Needs a little help with sort of how they position themselves with an organization, or even how they work together in a really solid way. I mean, this has been talked about for many years. R&D, to get new products to market in, a very agile way needs marketing. Like marketing covers the entire gamut. So, it really is the great unifier. And that's what I see as sort of the modern marketer. And then the other thing too is, and there's some examples of people like that. In fact, I think Sheldon on your team is a great example of a modern marketer. I really do. Like, he's an extraordinary storyteller. He's got great business sense. Like, he's just a solid leader, and he's kind of geeky, right? He's got this little bit of a kind of a tech kind of geek, IT sort of, geeks out of things. Like if you watch him on Zoom meetings, he's got the really cool mic, and he's got all the podcast stuff set up, and like he just sort of is kind of the perfect example of this modern marketer, right? So. Great storyteller, great business head, and just fantastic from the technology perspective. And then, the final thing on that as well is they use data, and they think about data in a very different way. They look at data as very much so as it's like their magic 8-ball, but it's telling them the truth. It's not just guessing where to go, right? So they have this ability to use data as this source of truth, and to be very agile and be able to change very quickly as market conditions change. Like, I mean, there still are lots of examples out there, big, large campaigns or programs that get launched, but they're becoming fewer and fewer. It's more about micro programs that you're releasing, and you're constantly using data to tweak that and change that. And those are all examples of sort of the modern marketer. But I think that being the unifier, I think, is the sort of the key hook behind all of that.
I like that. And if we had another half hour, maybe we'll do it in the future. I'd love to chat a little more about that progression from post-secondary schools into careers, and how the CMA can help and through the Chartered Marketer program provide growth development of individuals as they keep them modern and keep them up to speed on what's going on. I think that is one of the things we need to do. I do want to go to one of the questions that came in, that I think you addressed part of the other one. The question that came in, they want to know your opinion, Steve, on councils. And let me just start with kind of my opinion. And I think the councils have heard this. I think councils are like brothers. They're where we define, best practices. It's interesting in coming into the CEO role, and before that coming into the board role, I always thought that CMA must have 200 or 300 people working for it, because it projected its voice in a way that it was bigger than the number of staff we have. We only have 20, 25, 26 staff. And so we always have valued and gotten great value out of the kind of distributed intellectual and creative capital within our membership, right? And so, you know, I value councils to a great degree, but from your perspective, having sat on one, you know, any other thoughts on top of that you'd like to kind of express?
Yeah, I think they're the pulse of the marketing community. And kind of going back to that modern marketer, if we're trying to shape the CMA into be a modern association, a modern organization, we need to keep a pulse of what's going on. And it's impossible for you or your staff to have a full understanding. It's impossible for the board to do that. There's too many different things going on. The councils allow you to tap into that pulse of those different disciplines and really allow them to influence where the direction and what we should be doing and how we should pivot and change in different areas. So I think they're crucial. I was amazed of how much of an influence we had as a council. And again, you know, when I started with the CX Council, I think I stayed in the CX Council for 4 years or something. And it evolved tremendously over that time as customer experience became such a major component of marketing, to the point I think Alan DePency and I, the first real thing that him and I met and worked together, I didn't even know, I knew he was at RBC, but I didn't really know him that well, was him and I co-chaired the first customer experience event. And, you know, like in the influence, and we brought that forward and you know, the staff were like, we love it, let's go with this. So there's tremendous amount of influence, but it is your pulse. And also too, talk about a great place to sort of allow voices to be heard. And, right. You know, like my business, we do a lot of things where voice of the customer is sort of key to what we do. And to me, that is your key voice of the customer is, or voice of the member is the councils. Great.
No, thank you, Steve. And thank you so much for the conversation. I think we're coming up to the 30-minute mark, so we'll close her off and we can talk later, keep going. It's great to talk to you. And it's very great to have folks listening in and giving their opinions. Thank you for that. Looking forward to the next couple of years under your leadership, Steve. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Steve and John. That was a really great discussion. And thank you, Steve, for volunteering your time to be CMA's board chair. I know I really enjoy watching CMA constantly evolve and change. Thank you also, everyone, for your questions and for tuning in today. A recording of this will be sent out in an email after this with details for our next Marketing Connected Live, which will be taking place on July 3rd with Brady Hambleton from Canada's Children's Hospital Foundations, as well as Kim Koster from Koster Strategy. And they will be talking about how to reach consumers and donors during a pandemic, which is going to be also a really interesting conversation. If you missed any of the other previous Marketing Connected Live webinars, we will also be sending a link to access these on our website as well. Thank you again for tuning in and have a fantastic day.